I feel like I've actually come home. I grew up in Hoisington, Kansas, which is about 50 miles northwest of here, and our family attended the Reformed Presbyterian Church here in Sterling. So every Sunday, I would get in the car and drive for 50 miles, if you can imagine this, as a 6, 7-year-old coming to Sterling, Kansas. After I graduated from high school in Hoisington, I went to Kansas University and got a degree in business. And from there, I went to work and got a job in the commercial banking business in Wichita, Kansas. And I did that for 8 years. And then at the age of 30, I decided I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So I started my own investment banking company. And at the age of 40, 10 years later, I came to the realization, well, one, I had become more financially successful than I thought I ever would be. It was something I really hadn't planned on. It was something I wanted to do. But I'd become more financially successful than I thought I had ever could achieve. But while I was successful, I wasn't satisfied. There was something that was missing in my life. And so I began this quest to figure out, why wasn't I satisfied? And after some great counsel with a number of good friends, and just kind of working through it, the aha moment came to me. And that moment really revolved around, and it was very simple for me. I came to the realization that God was the owner of it all and not me. You see, I'd been a guy that thought, I was a 90-10 guy. I wanted to make a lot of money so my 10% that I was going to give away would be big. We can imagine what I was going to do with the 90%. And then when I came to understand that God owned it all, it was really 100-0. It totally changed my life. So I was in business and doing well. So I set out on this quest to determine, how can I run a high-impact organization? An organization that was not only successful, but significant. And what I am going to share with you today is really the lessons I've learned over the last 20 years. I started out thinking it was dealing with just an organization, but the more I got into it, I figured out it was really what I think are the keys to living a high-impact life. So we are going to, we call this little system enterprise stewardship, because an enterprise is anything that has people, property, and processes. And typically you think of that as a business, or as of a college, or maybe a church. But if you look at your own life, do you have people in your life? Yes. Do you have processes? Do you get up at a certain time? Do you brush your teeth? Do you go to class? Do you have processes? And do you have property? You may not have much property as a college student, but you will have. So you have people, processes, and property in your life. So how do you deal with those, as it were? So we call this enterprise stewardship, and it's really about living a high-impact life. So let me try to define what I consider to be a high-impact life. You see, at the age of 40, before I came to the realization that God owned it all, I thought a high-impact life was really making money. And I was not living this God-exalting, soul-satisfying life that I wanted to. So I'm going to define a high-impact life as a life that creates economic, social, and spiritual capital. You'll see the big arrow, and we're going to take just a couple minutes and talk about those 3 forms of capital. All of us have 3 things that we need in life. One is we need food, shelter, and clothing, and a little bit of walking around cash. We need that, and I call that economic capital. Another thing we need is relationships. Can you imagine living on this earth by yourself with no one else? It'd be terrible. A few years ago, there was a movie, Castaway. You remember that, Tom Hanks? Well, that movie, Tom was in an airplane that crashed. He wound up on an island all by himself. And so the whole movie was about living by yourself. In fact, he was so in need of relationship that he found a soccer ball, drew a picture on it. Remember that? And he was talking to this volleyball. Yeah, we don't want to be wrong here. Volleyball. And he'd be talking to this volleyball. I mean, it was creepy. But we are so in need of relationships. We're so in need of social capital. The third thing we need, and I think we want, are principles that we can we want principles that guide us through life. We want principles that tell us How can we create economic capital, and how can we create social capital? So I think those three things are really defined as economic, social, and spiritual capital. Let me spend just a couple of minutes on economic capital. I define that as the economic benefit or wealth created by your life. And I use life as an acrostic. L stands for labor, I stands for influence, F stands for financial resources, and E stands for expertise. You say, well, Pete, I'm a college student. I'm not wealthy. I have no financial resources. No, I disagree. You are wealthy. If you have labor and you can work, or if you have influence, and I think you have more influence than you think you do, and or if you have some expertise, that's probably the reason you're at Sterling College, is to gain expertise. So if you have one of those three, you have wealth. And in the United States of America, we are blessed to be in a capitalistic system. There are two really economic systems in the world that compete for the minds of how wealth is best created. One's capitalism, one's socialism. In socialism, it's a centrally driven, top-down, the government really decides everything. On the extreme case, they feed you, they take care of you, they provide your health care, etc., in a socialistic system. And typically, political freedom inside of that system is much less than in a capitalism. In capitalism, the key thing is it's a free market economy. You make your choices. You decide what you eat. You decide where you want to work. You decide how much money you're going to make. Private property and private property rights are essential in making that work. And I can just tell you, if you compare capitalism to socialism, the best system to create economic wealth is capitalism, by far. If you look over the last 200 years, capitalism has created 14 times as much gross domestic product as has socialist countries. If you took the capitalistic countries and compared them to socialist countries, the capitalist countries are going to create 14 times as much economic wealth as socialist countries, the capitalists will. So I'm a big proponent of free market capitalism. The second form of capital, social capital. I define social capital as a group of like-minded people coming together around a common cause. Concern with where we are today is that I think the institutions that create social capital are under attack. The family's under attack. Business is under attack. Our churches tend to be an inch deep and a mile wide. They're more concerned about creating fans than followers of Jesus. And our government is growing rapidly. So I see the moral fabric that creates social capital being stretched, and that concerns me. The last form of capital is what I call spiritual capital, and let me define that as the moral code by which you live. And there are probably a couple of sources of this moral code. One is going to be man, and two is going to be religion. Two big categories there. So if man is a source of moral code, in other words, if you make up your own moral code, that's an option. I personally have a problem with that. I don't think the last 100 years, if we go back and look at history, has treated us very well in man coming up with his own moral code. All you have to do is look at Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Mao Zedong. 100 million people didn't live because they didn't match up with their man-made moral codes of those leaders. And that's a problem for me. So then that takes us back to religion. And there's a number of religions out there. For me, my moral code is Judeo-Christianity. For me, Jesus Christ is the guy I'm going to follow. When I look at his life, that's the guy I want to be like. The Bible, over the last 20 years, as I have worked on this, I've spent lots of time in God's Word, and the amazing thing about it, it has an answer for most of your problems, if not all of them. It will give you the principles and the guidelines that will tell you how to create economic capital and create it properly. It'll tell you how to have great relationships. So for me, as a follower of Christ and living by God's Word, that is my moral code. You may disagree with me. You may say, Pete, I don't believe in this Jesus stuff and whatever. Well, let me tell you this. If you don't believe in that, as a business guy, I like to deal with people who don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, treat me as I want to be treated. And so consequently, even if you don't believe in Jesus, I think Judeo-Christian principles are critical to our society. The reason spiritual capital is the most important of the three forms of capital is this. It lays out the guidelines by how we should live. Let me go back to economic capital for a minute, in capitalism. You see, the people have a problem with capitalism in that they say it's an unfair distribution of wealth. You have rich people and you have poor people. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The reason that is if you take capitalism and you take the moral code out, for me, God, if you take capitalism, God, you wind up with greed. Capitalism without God results in greed, and greed winds up in labor abuse, price fixing, all this nutty stuff going on with Wall Street. Capitalism without God winds up in greed. Capitalism with God winds up in generosity. Social capital without God. The family without God winds up in distress. Business without God winds up in unethical practices. Government without God winds up in tyranny. Government with God is political freedom. So the moral code is absolutely critical to economic and social capital. So in summary, what is a high-impact life? I think a high-impact life is that God-exalting, soul-satisfying purpose. And if you are living a life that is what I call a balanced life, it's a life that is balanced with economic, social, and spiritual capital. If you can envision those three forms of capital being a triangle or the spokes of a tire, if they are balanced and the same length, economic, social, and spiritual capital, you're going to have a balanced tire and life is going to work for you. For the first 20 years of my life, my spoke was only focused on economic capital, and I didn't focus on spiritual or social capital, and I went thumping down the road. And no wonder I woke up one day and said, I'm not a satisfied person. So what is a high-impact life? It's understanding economic, social, and spiritual capital and having those in balance in your life. You have to have all three to have a high-impact life. Let me take just a few minutes and talk about the important question. We've defined what is a high-impact life. So how do you live a high-impact life? How do you have real impact economically, socially, spiritually? I want you to put your eyes on the main triangle up there. We have four values I have four values I try to live by. And those four values are the big words in the four triangles. The one in the middle, honor God. My value statement for me is I want to honor God by serving people, pursuing excellence, and stewarding resources. Remember when I was talking about people, places, people, processes, and property? What do you do with people? You serve them. What do you do with processes? You do it with excellence. And what do you do with the property God's given you? You become a good steward of that. If you do that, you will create economic, social, and spiritual capital. So let's take just a minute and talk about serving people. In Mark 10:45, it says, "For even the Son of Man," talking about Jesus, "came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Christ came to serve to the point of giving his life for you and for me. That is the ultimate service. So cannot we serve our fellow man? The second thing, pursuing excellence. If there's one thing that just sets me off about people who name the name of Christ and say they're a Christian, it's when they don't do things with excellence. You see, excellence honors God and it inspires man. Excellence honors God and it inspires man. And I think we need to work as Christians on excellence. you'll notice there are some little words around the corner of pursue excellence. I don't know if you can read it, but it's expertise, innovation, and discipline. So the word in the middle, excellence, pursue excellence, that's what we call our value. And if you want to be a person of excellence, we say you need the three virtues, which are the three words on the outside: expertise, innovation, and discipline. You are here to get expertise. If you're satisfied with a B, and you could get an A, that's not excellence. You need to work harder. You need to become an expert in whatever you're doing. The next thing is innovation. I'm telling you, innovation is so critical in our society. Some of you probably have some of these, or one of these, right? It's a smartphone. You know what this is? This is nothing more than a bunch of ground up sand and aluminum. That's all that is. This is a bunch of ground up sand in the form of silicon chips and aluminum, plus a whole lot of innovation. You see where innovation will get you? You can take a few dollars of material and turn it into hundreds of dollars of value because you've added innovation. So think about being innovative in your life. The third thing is discipline. None of us like it, but we have to have it. So if you want to be excellent, become an expert, study hard, be innovative, and be disciplined. As an employer, that's what I'm looking for. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the class, but if you bring those three things to the table, let me tell you, I do not know of a businessman in the country that would not give you a chance. Let me talk about stewarding resources. That has to do with property. All I want to tell you about stewarding resources is I don't believe that I own it. I think God owns it. And consequently, that makes everything I do a spiritual decision in one sense. How can I best steward those resources He gave me? The last value I want to talk about is honor God. How do we do that? Let's go back to the three virtues. I don't know if you can read them, but on the left is truth, on the right is faith, and on the top is character. Those are the three virtues that I think that it takes to honor God. So what does that mean? Truth is a head thing. Truth is knowledge. It's a head thing. Faith is a heart thing. And character is a hands thing. Okay? You see, many people know the truth. A lot of people know the truth. Some people believe the truth. But few people do the truth. Few people exercise character. And if you want to have a high-impact life, you've got to be dealing in that quadrant where you are exercising character. Truth is to know. It's a head thing. Faith is to believe. It's a heart thing. Character is to do. It's a hands thing. I can tell you that faith is very important. Your life should be the pursuit of truth. I don't care if it's economic truth, spiritual truth, social truth, relational truth. Pursue the truth. Make sure you understand what the truth is. If you think socialism is better than capitalism, go do the work on it. Don't take somebody's advice. Go seek it out. Seek out what the truth is. And then once you understand what the truth is, believe it with all your heart. You see, faith is the fuel that turns knowing into doing. Faith is a fuel that turns knowing into doing. If you want to be a high-impact person, you have got to have faith, and lots of it. And if you do that, it will wind up resulting in you being a person of character. Young people, our country is at a crossroads. We are choosing, and will choose over the next 10 or 20 years, are we going to be a capitalistic country or are we going to be a socialistic country? And I'm just telling you, I'm a capitalist and I believe with all my heart it's the best way to create economic capital. But capitalism without God is not good. Capitalism with God is fabulous. So we are at a moral crossroads. Our culture, socially, our cultural fabric is being pulled. Our institutions of family, church, business, and government are being stretched. And you have got to get in the game. You've got to figure out what the truth is, and you've got to believe it, and you've got to go out there and do it. We need families that are vibrant. We need churches that are on fire. We need businesses that are ethical, and we need government that is limited. But it is up to you. This country has been great, and we all have a great place to live because I believe that we have worked diligently to create those three forms of capital. But I'm worried that they are slipping away. I would end by encouraging you. Pursue the truth. Believe it with all of your heart. And then go out and do it. And you will live a God-exalting, soul-satisfying life. And you will create those three forms of capital. Thank you very much. You have been a great audience.